The sunlight spilled across the cobblestone street like liquid gold, warming the front windows of a small cafe that smelled of fresh pastries and strong coffee. Behind the counter stood a woman whose face carried both grace and quiet exhaustion, her hair tied back loosely, strands falling onto her cheeks as she wiped down a table. Her name was Mira Alcott, and though she appeared like any other cafe owner preparing for the day, her eyes held the shadows of a past she rarely spoke of. For years, she had learned to build her life piece by piece, with hands that once trembled from heartbreak now steady enough to knead dough and pour cappuccinos. But that ordinary morning, the sound of the bell above the cafe door would tear her world open. Because the man who stepped inside was the one she had loved and lost, the man who had abandoned her without explanation. And fate had orchestrated the cruelest reunion. Her daughter, barely 7 years old, looked up at the stranger and whispered the word that froze them all, "Daddy." Backhand index pointing right. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us of the power of forgiveness, please like this video, share it with friends, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel Kindness Journal to support more heart-touching stories like this one. Myra's daughter, Sienna, had grown up with stories carefully edited by her mother. She knew her father had gone far away, but she never knew why. She knew he existed, yet she never had the chance to hear his voice, to hold his hand, or to sit upon his lap. And in the innocence of children, she had always dreamed of what it might feel like if he ever walked into her life. That morning, as she sat on a wooden stool near the counter with her coloring book, she lifted her wide hazel eyes and met the gaze of the tall man in a tailored suit who had just stepped in. There was something about his sharp jaw, his dark hair slightly tousled, the tension in his brow as if he carried too many unspoken regrets. And without knowing why, the word burst from her lips, "Daddy." The men froze. His name was Adrian Kale, now the CEO of a major investment firm, a figure who appeared in magazines and business conferences, always smiling, always untouchable. But beneath the armor of success, his heart cracked the moment he heard that word. For years, he had buried his guilt, convincing himself that Mira had moved on, that his absence had been justified by circumstances too complicated to explain. Yet here he was, standing in front of the family he never truly knew, confronted by the innocence of a child and the pain in Myra's eyes. Myra's hands trembled as she set down the tray she had been holding. She never thought this day would come. When Adrian had walked away years ago, she was left pregnant, frightened, and heartbroken. She had begged him to stay, but duty and fear had driven him into the world of ambition and wealth. Left alone, she poured her soul into raising Sienna, opening a small cafe in a quiet town, far away from the noise of the city and the echo of his betrayal. And yet, the past had walked right back into her life, wrapped in an expensive suit and haunted eyes. The cafe grew silent for a moment, the kind of silence that hums with unspoken words. Adrian's throat tightened as he looked at Sienna, her curls falling over her shoulders, her smile uncertain, her tiny hands clutching the crayon she had been using to draw. She looked so much like Mira when she was younger, and it was like staring into a mirror of what he had lost. He wanted to kneel down, to speak, to explain, but he saw the steel in Myra's expression, a woman who had survived too much to let him shatter her world again. As the day wore on, the ordinary rhythm of the cafe faltered. Customers came and went, but Myra's heart pounded every time Adrian lingered at a corner table, sipping coffee he barely tasted. He had no right to be there, she told herself, no right to walk back into a life he had abandoned. But a part of her, buried beneath years of resilience, still ached at the sight of him. Memories clawed their way back, of nights spent laughing in small apartments, of dreams whispered under the stars, of promises broken like glass when he chose his career over love. Sienna, too young to grasp the depth of the storm brewing between her parents, only felt curiosity. She approached Adrian with the boldness only a child could have, asking simple questions that pierced his heart. "Why are your eyes sad?" she asked once, tilting her head. He could not answer. He only smiled faintly and told her she had her mother's courage. Days passed, and Adrian kept returning. At first, Mira wanted to throw him out, to banish him from the safe world she had built. But life has a way of complicating even the firmest decisions. She saw the way Sienna's eyes lit up when Adrian appeared, the way her laughter echoed brighter when he sat nearby. And against her will, Mira began to notice something different in him. Adrian was not the same reckless man who once walked away. There were lines of regret on his face, humility in his voice, and a gentleness in the way he spoke to Sienna as if he were afraid every word might break. But trust is not rebuilt in days. Mira wrestled with her anger, her doubts, and her fear of history repeating itself. She asked herself if second chances were for fools, or if love had room to grow even from the ashes of betrayal. For Adrian, every visit was a test of patience, a plea without words. He helped in small ways, repairing a broken chair in the café, carrying heavy boxes, staying late when the café was busy. These were not grand gestures but quiet offerings, tokens of a man trying to earn back the fragments of what he had shattered. And then one afternoon, as the sun painted the town in shades of amber, Mira found herself watching Adrian and Sienna laughing together in the corner of the café. Sienna had convinced him to taste one of her mother's new pastry recipes, and when he exaggerated a silly face, she erupted in giggles that filled the air like music. Myra's chest tightened, tears stinging her eyes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine what life could have been if he had stayed. But forgiveness does not erase pain, it transforms it. Mira confronted Adrian, demanding answers she had long deserved. He confessed everything: the fear of failure, the pressure of family expectations, the belief that he was not worthy of being a father at the time. He admitted his shame, his years of emptiness despite his wealth, and how he had searched for her in silence before finally finding her café. His words did not erase the wounds, but they poured honesty where lies had once lived. Slowly, day by day, the walls Mira had built began to soften. She did not forgive him all at once, but she allowed the possibility of healing to enter their lives. Sienna, innocent and full of hope, became the bridge between them, her laughter stitching together what had been torn apart. And in the sunlight of that little café, something new began to bloom, not the reckless love of youth, but a deeper, steadier bond shaped by pain, growth, and the courage to start again. By the time autumn leaves began to fall, the café was no longer just Myra's sanctuary. It became a place of second chances, where a family was slowly mending, one day at a time. Adrian was not perfect, Mira was not naive, and Sienna was not blind. But together, they were writing a story not defined by abandonment but by the strength to rebuild. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Stories like these remind us that even the deepest wounds can be healed when love is given another chance. Speech balloon. Before we close, we have a special request: comment below what you would have done if you were in Myra's place. Would you forgive, or would you walk away? And so, in the golden light of an ordinary café, Mira, Adrian, and little Sienna discovered that sometimes, the hardest goodbyes can lead to the most unexpected reunions. And though scars remained, love had quietly returned, not as a demand, but as a gift of grace.